Part 2, Chapters 2 and 3 of Oblomov by Ivan Alexandrovich Goncharov. Translated by C.J. Hogarth. Chapter 2. From that time forth she lived in him alone, while he, for his part, racked his brains to avoid incurring the loss of her esteem. Whenever she detected in his soul, and she could probe that soul very deeply, the least trace of its former characteristics, she would work for him to heap himself with reproaches for his lethargy and fear of life. Just as he was about to yawn, as he was actually opening his mouth for the purpose, her astonished gaze would transfix him and cause his mouth to snap with a click which jarred his teeth. Still more did he hasten to resume his alacrity whenever he perceived that his lassitude was communicating itself to her, and threatening to render her cold and contemptuous. Instantly he would undergo a revival of strenuous activity, and then the shadow between them would disappear, and mutual sympathy once more beat in strong, clear accord. Yet this solicitude on his part had not as yet its origin in the magic ring of love. Indeed, the effect of his charmed toils was negative rather than positive. True, he no longer slept all day. On the contrary, he rode, read, walked, and even thought of resuming his writing and his agricultural schemes. Yet the ultimate direction, the inmost significance of his life, still remained confined to the sphere of good intentions. Particularly disturbing did he find it whenever Olga plied him with some particular question or another, and demanded of him, as of a professor, full satisfaction of her curiosity. This occurred frequently, and arose not out of pedantry on her part, but out of a desire to know the right and the wrong of things. At times a given question would absorb her even to the point of forgetting her consideration for Oblomov. For instance, on one occasion, when she had besought his opinion concerning double stars, and he was incautious enough to refer her to Herschel, he was dispatched to purchase the great authority's book, and commanded to read it through, and to explain the same to her full satisfaction. On another occasion he was rash enough to let slip a word or two concerning various schools of painting, wherefore he had to undergo another week's reading and explaining, and also to pay sundry visits to the Hermitage Museum. In the end, how he trembled whenever she asked him a question. " Why do you not say something? " she would say to him. " Surely it cannot be that the subject wearies you? "" No, but how I love you !" he would reply, as though awakening from a trance, to which she would retort, " Do you really? But that is not what I have just asked you." On another occasion he said to her, " Cannot you see what is taking place in me? To me speaking is a difficulty. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. There seems to be something hindering me, something weighing me down. It is a something that is like the great rock which oppresses a man during deep sorrow. And, strangely enough, the effect of it is the same whether I happen to be sad or gay. Somehow my breath seems to hurt me as I draw it, and occasionally I come near to weeping. Yet, like a man overcome with grief, I feel that I should be lightened and relieved if I could weep. What, think you, is amiss with me?" She looked at him with a smile of happiness which nothing could disturb. Evidently no weight was pressing upon her heart. " Shall I tell you? " she said. " Yes." " You are in love." He kissed her hand. "And you?" he asked. "Are you in love?" " In love? " she repeated. " I do not like the term for myself." " I like you. That is better." " I like you? " he re-echoed. " But a mother, or a father, or a nurse, or even a dog may be liked. The phrase may be used as a garment, even as can " Even as can an old dressing gown?" she suggested with a smile. Presently she added, " Whether I am actually in love with you or not, I hardly know. Perhaps it is a stage that has not yet arrived. All I know is that I have never liked father or mother or nurse or dog as I like you. I feel lost without you. To be parted from you for a short while makes me sorry. To be parted from you for a long while makes me sad. And were you to die, I should wear mourning for the rest of my life, and never again be able to smile. To me such love is life, and life is— Yes? Is a duty, an obligation. Consequently, love is also a duty. God has sent me that duty, and has bid me perform it." As she spoke, she raised her eyes to heaven. "Who can have inspired her with these ideas?" Oblomov thought to himself. "Neither through experience, nor through trial, nor through fire and smoke can she have attained this clear, simple conception of life and love." "Then, since there is joy in life, is there also suffering?" he asked aloud. "I do not know," she replied. "That lies beyond my experience as much as it lies beyond my understanding." "But how well I understand it! Ah," she said merrily, "what glances you throw at me sometimes! Even my aunt has noticed it. But how can there be joy in love if it never brings one moments of ecstatic delight?" "What?" she replied with a glance at the scene around her. "Is not all this so much ecstatic delight?" She looked at him, smiled, and gave him her hand. "Do you think," she continued, "that presently I shall not be sorry when you take your leave? Do you think that I should not go to bed the earlier in order that I may the sooner fall asleep and cheat the wearisome night, and be able to see you again in the morning?" The light in Oblomov's face had become brighter and brighter with each successive question, and his gaze more and more suffused with radiance. Chapter 3 Next morning, however, he rose pale and sombre. There were traces of sleeplessness on his features, wrinkles on his brow, and a lack of fire and eagerness in his eyes. Once upon a time he would have sunk back upon the pillow after drinking his tea, but now he had grown out of the habit, and contented himself with resting his elbow where his head had just been lying. Something in him was working strongly, but that something was not love. True, Olga's image was still before him, but only at a distance and in a mist, and shorn of its rays, like that of some stranger. With aching eyes he gazed at it for a moment or two, and then sighed. "To live as God wills, and not as oneself wills, is a wise rule," he murmured. "Nevertheless—" "Clearly that is so," presently he went on. "Otherwise one would fall into a chaos of contradictions, such as no human mind, however daring and profound, could hope to resolve. Yesterday one has wished, to-day one attains the madly longed-for object, and to-morrow one will blush to think that one ever desired it. Therefore one will fall to cursing life, and all because of a proud, independent striding through existence and a wilful 'I will.' No, rather does one need to feel one's way, to close one's eyes, to avoid becoming either intoxicated with happiness or inclined to repine because it has escaped one. Yes, that is life. Who was it first pictured life as happiness and gratification? The fool. Life is a duty, says Olga. Life is a grave obligation which must be fulfilled as such. He heaved a profound sigh. "No, I cannot visit Olga to-day," he went on. "My eyes are now open, and I see my duty before me. Better part with her now, while it is still possible, than later, when I shall have sworn to part with her no more." How had this mood of his come about? What wind had suddenly affected him? How had it brought with it these clouds? Wherefore was he now for assuming such a grievous yoke? Only last night he had looked into Olga's soul, and seen there a radiant world and a smiling destiny. Only last night he had read both her horoscope and his own. What had since happened? Frequently in summer one goes to sleep while the weather is still and cloudless, and the stars are glimmering softly. How beautiful the countryside will look to-morrow under the bright beams of morning, one thinks to oneself, and how glad one will be to dive into the depths of the forest and seek refuge from the heat. Then suddenly one awakes to the beating of rain, to the sight of grey, mournful clouds, to a sense of cold and damp. In Oblomov's breast the poison was working swiftly and vigorously. In thought he reviewed his life, and for the 100th time felt his heart ache with repentance and regret for what he had lost. He kept picturing to himself what by now he would have been had he strolled boldly ahead and lived a fuller and broader life, and exerted his faculties. Whence he passed to the question of his present condition, and of the means whereby Olga had contrived to become fond of him, and of the reason why she still was so. Is she not making a mistake? Was a thought which suddenly flashed through his mind like lightning, and as it did so the lightning seemed to strike his heart and to shatter it. He groaned with the pain. Yes, she is making a mistake. He kept saying again and again, she merely loves me as she works embroidery on canvas. In a quiet, leisurely manner a pattern has evolved itself, and she has turned it over and admired it. Soon she will lay it aside and forget all about it. Yes, her present affection is a mere making ready to fall in love, a mere experiment of which I am the subject, for the reason that I chance to be the first subject to come to hand. So he collated the circumstances and compared them. Never would she have noticed him at all had not Schtoltz pointed him out, and infected her young, impressionable heart with sympathy for his, Oblomov's, position, and therefore implanted in her a desire to see if possibly she could shake that dreamy soul from its lethargy before leaving it once more to its own devices. Yes, that is how the case stands, he said to himself with an access of revulsion. He rose and lit a candle with a trembling hand. It is just that and nothing more. Her heart was ready to accept love, it was tensely awaiting it, and I happened to fall in her way, and at the same time to fall into a blunder. Only would some one else need to arrive for her to renounce that blunder. As soon as ever she saw that some one else, she would turn from me with horror. In fact, I am stealing what belongs to another. I am no better than a thief. My God, to think that I have been so blind! Glancing into the mirror, he saw himself pale, dull, and sallow. Involuntarily he pictured to his mind those handsome young fellows who would one day come her way. Suddenly she would take fire, glance at him, and burst out laughing. A second time he glanced into the mirror. No, he was not the type with which women could fall in love. He flung himself down upon the bed and buried his face in the pillow. " Forgive me, Olga," he murmured, " and may you always be happy." He gave orders that he was to be reported as " not at home " to any one who might call from the Ilyinskis' house. Then he sat down to write Olga a letter. He wrote it swiftly. In fact, the pen flew over the pages, and when he had finished the missive he was surprised to find that his spirits felt cheered and his mind easier. Why so? He reflected. Probably because I have put into what I have just written the whole sorrow of my heart. Next he dispatched the letter by the hand of Zakhar, and, leaving the house, turned into the park and seated himself on the grass. Among the turf shoots ants were scurrying hither and thither, and jostling one another and parting again. From above the scene looked like the commotion in a human market place. It showed the same bustle, the same congestion, the same swarm of population. Here and there, too, a bumblebee buzzed over a flower, and then crept into its chalice, while a knot of flies had glued themselves to a drop of sap on the trunk of a lime tree. In the foliage a bird was repeating an ever insistent note, as though calling to its mate, and a couple of butterflies were tumbling through the air in a giddy, fluttering, intricate movement which resembled a waltz. Everywhere from the herbage strong scents could be detected arising. Everywhere there could be heard a ceaseless chirping and twittering. Suddenly he saw Olga approaching, walking very quietly. She was wiping her eyes with a handkerchief as she did so. He had not expected those tears. Somehow they seemed to sear his heart. He rose and ran to meet her. "Olga, Olga," were his first tender words. She started, looked at him with an air of astonishment, and turned away. He followed her. "You are weeping," he said. "Yes, and 'tis you have made me do so," she replied, while her form shook with sobs. "But it is beyond your power to comfort me." "That miserable letter!" he ejaculated, suddenly becoming full of remorse. For answer she opened a basket which she was carrying, took from it the letter, and handed it to him. "Take it away," she said. "The sight of it will only make me weep more bitterly." He stuffed it silently into his pocket, and with head bent seated himself beside her. "Give me credit for good intentions," he urged. "In any case the letter was evidence only of my care for your happiness, of the fact that I was thinking of it in advance, and was ready to sacrifice myself on its account. Do you think that I wrote the message callously, that inwardly I was not shedding tears the whole time? Why should I have acted as I did?" "Why, indeed?" she interrupted. "For the reason that you wished to surprise me here, and to see whether I was weeping, and how bitterly. Had you really meant the letter as you say, you would be making preparations to go abroad instead of meeting me as you are now doing. Last night you wanted my 'I love you'; to day you want to see my tears; and to morrow, I dare say, you will be wishing that I were dead." "How can you wrong me like that? Believe me, I would give half my life to see smiles on your face instead of tears." "Yes, now that you have seen a woman weeping on your account. But no, you have no heart. You say that you had no desire to make me weep. Had that been so, you would not have acted as you have done." "Then what ought I to do?" he asked tenderly. "Will you let me beg your pardon?" "No, only children beg pardon, or persons who have jostled some one in a crowd. Moreover, even when granted, such pardon is worth nothing." "But what if the letter should be true, and your affection for me all a mistake?" he suggested. "You are afraid, then? You are afraid of falling into a well? You are afraid lest some day I should hurt you by ceasing to be fond of you?" "Would I could sink into the ground!" he reflected. The pain was increasing in proportion as he divined Olga's thoughts. "On the other hand," she went on, "suppose you were to weary of love, even as you have wearied of books, of work, and of the world in general. Suppose that, fearing no rival, you were to go to sleep by my side, as you do on your sofa at home, and that my voice were to become powerless to wake you. Suppose that your present swelling of heart were to pass away, and your dressing gown come to acquire more value in your eyes than myself. Often and often do such questions prevent my sleeping, yet I do not on that account trouble you with conjectures as to the future. Always I hope for better things, for with me happiness has cast out fear. Only for one thing I have long been sitting and waiting, namely for happiness, until at length I have come to believe that I had found it. Even if I had made a mistake, at least this," and she laid her hand upon her heart, "does not convict me of guilt. God knows that I never desired such a fate, and I had been so happy." She broke off abruptly. "Then be happy again," urged Oblomov. "No, rather go you whither you have always been wishing to go," she said softly. "You are wiser than I am," he murmured, twisting a sprig of acacia between his fingers. " No, I am simpler and more daring than you. What are you afraid of? Do you really think that I should cease to love you?" " With you by my side I fear nothing," he replied. " With you by my side nothing terrible can fall to my lot." CHAPTER 4